Hey Gateway, this is Pastor Jason Crabtree, and welcome to Gateway Midweek. And so, again, we get together every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. and just always want to look at our purpose, invite, connect, develop, and serve. And within all of that, there are stories. In fact, when I was a kid growing up, I don't know about you guys, and we'll introduce you here in a second, but we used to have testimonies, right? So. Now in the world they're called stories, but back when I was a kid we had testimonies, and that's just the stories of what God has done, right, of God's faithfulness. And so I'm excited to introduce two great individuals, and so why don't you tell us your names and maybe how long you've been together and how long you've been here at Gateway.
My name is Pat Dowdy. That's my husband Jim. And we've been married for seven and a half years, but we met almost 50 years ago. So that's a story in and of itself.
Yes, I'm sure. And how long have you guys been connected?
We've been here at Gateway probably 5 years plus.
5 to 6, yeah. Almost 6 years.
Yeah, awesome.
So we'll mention that later.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny as when you're in ministry and you're at a church that is of a good size. Over the years, you'll hear names pop up, and for quite a while, I kept hearing, "Have you met Jim and Pat? You got to meet Jim and Pat. I think they'd be great in ministry." And so I eventually did get to meet Jim and Pat, and Jim has been helping with our divorce care here for I would say close to a year.
A year, yeah.
And so it's been great getting to know Jim a little bit, getting to know his family, we want to just tell some stories. And so I thought it would be great to just get some individuals and just have them kind of share a little bit of their story, what God has meant, and that way, for those of you out there that are watching, we know that there's going to be something said that you're going to connect to. That you're going to realize that you're not alone in whatever it is that you're going through, that God is faithful, and we're going to hear stories of how true that is. And so why don't you start us off as far as maybe share a little bit of your story and kind of what has God put on your heart to share?
I will, and as Jim and I were talking earlier today, when you get to be in your 70s, we have lots of stories and a lifetime of involvement, with God, and so we're going to try and condense some of that down. But I'll start by saying that my faith journey has not been a straight path, and neither was Jim's, and our relationship hasn't been a straight path either, because as you said, we've been married 7.5 years, but have known each other for almost 50, and we met in our mid-20s. We were both working at a Sears in Northridge, California. And we just became...
Do we need to explain what a Sears is? I don't know if people know.
It used to be a big retail outfit.
Yeah.
And we were both department managers, and our departments were right next to each other. And there were a lot of people there in their 20s, that were these managers. And we all just got to be friends and just had a lot of fun together. And we didn't date, at that point, but we knew each other really well. And then, we left Sears and kind of went on our own way. But going back to, my faith start, I was raised in Iowa in the 50s. And we were involved in real strong Bible-based churches back then. And I can actually remember I was in the 5th grade, and every Wednesday I would go to church and have a Bible study, and we actually read through the whole King James Version of the Bible.
Yeah.
And most kids would have just thought, this is hard. But I loved it. And so, I was really invested in my faith as a child. And then we moved to California in 1959, and I think I was halfway through the 6th grade. But I went through church through high school. Then I did have a scholarship. I went to UCLA. And that was kind of a big turning point for me, because that's when the world started getting a hold of my thought process. And I really did talk myself out of believing at that point. I didn't really ever get to the point where I was denying God or even denying Jesus, but I was totally confused about what the real answers were. And so I was living away from my faith, and all through my 20s. And I married 2 men in my 20s who were both atheists, and I was away from my faith. And what I would like to say to a lot of the young people out here is that that's not a good idea. Because everybody's trying to be their own God at that point, and so they're making up their own rules. And they don't always make really good rules for the other person. They're thinking of themselves. It's kind of a selfish way to be. So I went through 2 divorces my second divorce wasn't until my mid-30s, but 2 men that I married that I divorced early on in life. And I had some pretty rough experiences during that time as well. So what happened by the time I got into my 30s was I started really becoming a serious seeker again. I sensed that hole in me, and I was wondering what it was that needed to fill that. And my father passed away when I was 36, and that was a turning point for me, because I remember walking into their home after he was gone, and his chair was sitting there, but he was no longer there. And all of a sudden, the question, where is he, became extremely important to me. It was no longer a fun game to think about. It was very serious. I loved this man, where was he? And I knew he was a believer, so I really wanted to know. That was also about the same time, and Jim will go through this, that he and I started actually dating after my divorce. I went to San Diego for an aerobics convention, and he lived there. And a friend of ours, who we also worked with at Sears, is the man, his name is Park, and I had called him, and he said, well, if you're going to San Diego, Jim lives down there, why don't you go see him? So
and I want to say quick, too, when she says aerobics, she means old school, what do you call it?
Aerobics.
CrossFit. It's old school CrossFit.
Well, actually, I owned Feminine Fitness here in town at the time, and so yes, I was doing and teaching aerobics, and it was a cool thing then, and it would be now if they still did it. But anyway, so I went to San Diego for this convention, met with Jim, and I thought, wow, where was this guy 12 years ago? I mean, he was really attractive to me. So we did date for that 3-year period of time, only he still lived in San Diego, LA. I was up here and owned a business, and we couldn't quite figure out how to get the 2 of us together. But at that time, he was seeking too. I mean, we were both really wanting to fill that emptiness in us. And at the end of the 3 years, because we couldn't get together in the same city, we did split up. And he can tell you a little bit about that story. But at that point, my serious seeking became even more serious. And I had several profound experiences. One I'll tell you about when I was in my mid-40s. I went to Croatia to a place called Medjugorje with a whole big group of my Catholic friends. There were 29 of us, and 2 of us were Protestants, so that gives you an idea. We were traveling with a priest. And that was a very Catholic sort of experience, but I had a mountaintop experience at 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the night by myself on this rocky hill in Medjugorje, where God actually spoke to me and told me what was wrong with my life. And so I just sat there and meditated on that message for a couple of hours until the sun came up, and then I was able to continue my journey up the hill where the cross was, and I could get up there and sing and pray. And I realized at that point that what God was saying to me was that I was trying to do this whole journey on my own strength. I was tough, I was smart, I was independent, and so I was bulldozing my way through all the hardships, through all of life's experiences, And God said, you don't have to do that. You can rely on me. That's what I'm here for. And so that was the strong message that I got. It wasn't an easy transition after that, but I was continuously working towards that end.
Yeah, you know, when you say that, I know for myself personally, I did have a similar situation where I felt like God was telling me, let me do all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And what a story for people to hear.
Yeah.
Especially during now.
Yeah.
We're wanting to do things in our own strength, and God is saying, hey, let me do the heavy lifting.
Well, if there's nothing else that we can get out of this year, it's that we don't have control over any of this.
Yeah.
And we really have to rely on him. And not only do we have to rely on him, but what he tells us in the Bible is that it's all for our own good.
Yeah.
It's for our good that we do this, not to punish us or to restrict us or any of those things.
Yeah.
So I was off doing my thing at that point. I was in financial services, and I had moved to San Francisco for part of that and worked. And Jim was doing his thing, and I'll let him kind of take off from here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, some months ago, as I was telling you earlier, I had this urge that I wanted to solidify, or at least get clear in my mind, what had gone on in my life, with my faith journey, if you will. And so one night, actually, in the middle of the night, I got up and I wrote down some stuff, a little short thing, and it's just a real overview against the advice of counsel. I'm going to kind of read this to you. But it's kind of my view, and again, it tells how old I am. I use the word testimony because this is what it kind of is. But it's my life testimony that I believe that shows the faithfulness and the steadfastness of Jesus Christ. It was 1996. I'm 50 years old, and that was the year that I got saved. I wrote here that at age 5, as a little 5-year-old in a kind of a little scary situation, which is a funny story, and I took ribbing for this all my years growing up. But in a little frightful time, I cried out, "Save me, Jesus." And I believe that God honored that. But anyhow, at age 14, in a little Nazarene church over in Hanford, I answered an altar call, if you will. That was God calling. That was that calling, and I sense to my life. But by the time I'm 16 years old, in fact, I'm standing in the back of that same Nazarene church listening to another evangelist talking about sin and the gospel. And I remember saying to myself, I'm a good guy. I'm not a sinner. I don't really need all this. So I neglected that salvation, that answer, that call that I did, and whether I was saved or not, I have no idea. But at about age 33, I think God made another serious attempt to call me. Started going to church with some friends, et cetera, et cetera. I entertained it, but I nonetheless ignored that call also. This, I believe, led to what I call a few years of me living on the dark side. Just totally wasted some years, 2 or 3 years. But then I got back to, quote, normal, which really is a life with no meaning and occasional chaos. Then came 1994, divorce. I'll even interject number 3 for me. I'd gotten married very, very early, long story, but a bankruptcy and 2 very small children. My wife and I had been married for about 5 years. We had 2 little children, which is what both of us wanted. But with the chaos of business failure, couldn't take the stress, and we found ourselves separated. But I often said that God used those 2 kids as the hook to cause me to stop running away. Bringing the kids into this mess, I never envisioned. I was in my mid-40s by this time. Well, I was almost 50. I never envisioned this, and it was almost more than I could bear. But then one day, seeing no way out of this, I'm sitting in my home office looking at myself in a mirror, just screaming, ranting, and raving in anger. And I called out, again, just using the words, but I called out, God, why is my life such a mess? And to my surprise, in the back of my head, I heard an answer that said, well, you're finally getting this, you're finally asking the right person. All I remember is the anger went. I'm just sitting there staring at myself. And that began a journey, and I'll interject a little more about that time later, but that began a journey of about 2 years until I found myself finally asking God, because I had always, as Pat said about not denying, God was always, yeah, I believe in God. I never remember saying the word Jesus Christ, or really talking about that. But at that end of that 2 years, I in my little prayer to God was, would Jesus let me come home? And I felt the reply, well, he's here, you ask him. So that day in the fall of 1996, I asked Jesus if I could come home. There was real no direct answer to me about then, but I just had this sense of, well, wait here. Others will be coming. Do what he tells you. Well, after I got into the Bible and started studying, I realized that the he was the Holy Spirit. And he's been with me ever since, leading me, guiding me, sustaining me in the good times and the not so good times, seeing me through my small moments of doubt, and most of all, changing me into a better person, causing me to walk in the path he would have me to walk. Yes, me sometimes straying into the weeds, but him there to give me the strength and the desire to get back into the path. And I thank God every day he never abandoned that 5-year-old boy who in his innocence and through the grace of God himself cried out, "Save me, Jesus." And I pray every day for the others who will be coming. A real note into that. At that time when I did that crying out to God, it was within a day or 2 days. She and I had made contact again after 7 years.
Park got married.
Mutual friend got
Park
married.
got married and we invited us.
And we went to his wedding and we made contact again. So we were kind of in touch. And she knew that I was hurting through this divorce because that happened all at the same time. And I swear within a day, my phone rings and it's her. I need you to come to Visalia. I got some friends I want you to meet and I want you to talk to you about some stuff. My first thought was, we were involved in a direct sales company. Well, it's no more for me. But
She doesn't want me to sell
regardless of
anything,
that,
does she?
I came up, we met, we talked about God, about Jesus, about salvation, and that's what we started really that 2-year journey.
Yeah.
I think you should share about when you started reading the Bible so heavily, because I think that was incredible.
The Lord, they talk about gifts, I've always thought, well, I have this gift, this is what I use. But I think my gift initially was that God gave me the word to read. I was single, I was divorced. I had these 2 kids. We had joint custody. And I'd lost my business, so I was basically broke, couldn't go anywhere. And I was confined to home pretty much, other than when my kids were there. And I really had nothing to do. But the Bible I just started reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and reading, and it was a blessing. I got a little snooty about that, I think, and I think the Lord kind of slapped me on the hands. But anyhow, I think, and that brings us up to the time that we kind of became friends. We stayed friends. Then for the next 12 years, I'm busy raising my kids because within a couple of years I got full custody of the kids. So I had a beautiful daughter and a great son who were 2 and 4 at the time at the divorce. And by this time they're getting into the school, and then I got I had full custody by that point. So I was busy with raising the kids and being involved in my little Baptist church over at the coast, and the Lord working on me. I mean, a lot of work to do. But we stayed in touch. We would see each other 2, 3, 4 times a year.
Well, he was from Hanford
Oh, yeah, that's
initially.
the original.
So that's the other peculiar thing, is that here we are both, we meet in LA, but we're in the Central Valley now.
Yeah.
She had
And
moved
he's
up,
yeah.
up to Visalia, and I grew up in Hanford, so when I would come over, or her best friend lived at the coast, and so when she'd go, we'd see each other.
Yeah.
Consequently, my kids grew up seeing her on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You know, those 2 or 3, 4 times
Yeah.
a year, they would interact together. And
I love those little kids. They
Yeah.
were so
Watched
adorable.
them.
You know Melissa now. I mean, she was 4 and 2 when I met them, and they were just adorable little kids. And so it was fun for me to be able to interact with them. Plus, when he lived in Cambria and I would go to Morro Bay, usually on Sunday I'd come up and go to church with them in that little church.
little Baptist church there
Yeah.
in town. But that, I don't know if we'll quickly bring us up to that 12-year period disappeared, or about 12 years.
We weren't
If the
dating.
Lord would have told me it was going to be 12 years, I might not have been so compliant. But
You weren't dating.
But I didn't date during that time. And so in 2013, I had a little 4-day weekend off. I was working by that, obviously working. And it was a little 2-day men's retreat at my church. And then I had 2 free days, and she'd been bugging me to come to Fresno.
Don't miss Christmas.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, we had seen each other that Christmas. She was here in Visalia, and I was over at my sister's in Hanford, and I called her up and I said, why don't you come on over,
Kids will
have lunch? The kids are back. My son's home from the Marine Corps. My daughter's home. She was married
She
by
was
then.
married.
And so she came over. We all had lunch, spent the day. She says I was very flirty, maybe a little flirty.
I went home from that visit going, whoa, something's different. Because
Well,
we'd
it's the
just been,
Christmas spirit, right?
I know, but he didn't sense it. But we'd just been friends all those years, nothing romantic. And all of a sudden I'm going, something's up here. He's different. He's flirty. And even Melissa picked up on
Well,
it.
it
Which
transpired to February, and I'm up there, and we were out at dinner, and we were talking about our relationship, how we'd been these friends, and was it going to go any further or not go any further? And
I just blurted out.
yes.
I just blurted out. And I said, because he was talking about something else, and I said, well, what about me? Have you given up on me?
or written us off.
Or written me off or something, however that went. And he just said, no. And it was like, click. I mean, it was, there's a real possibility here that I hadn't even considered for the last 12 years.
But even at that point, I'm thinking, I don't know, I hadn't thought about it. I never considered it, really, is what it was. But then the next morning, we're sitting in her kitchen having coffee, and just looking at her and talking with her, and it was like the Lord again goes, I felt like Paul in Damascus. The scales fell off my eyes.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, why haven't we gotten married? To myself, I said that. And so then in my very romantic, charismatic way, I blurted out, why aren't we married?
Yeah. That one you probably should have written
I
down.
should have written that one down. But I called my kids, and at that point, then a month later, I
Proposed.
very cheesy.
He did propose.
And 2.5 months later, we were married.
We got married
But I called my
right away.
kids to tell them, that we were going to do this. And my daughter, the first thing she said to me was, I am so happy. I have been praying for you guys for a long time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that makes me tear up just hearing it.
Yeah.
Because as a stepmom, how could you ask for more
Yeah.
than to have your stepdaughter saying,
Yeah.
I've been praying for you two to get together. And then at our wedding, she stood up, and his 2 kids stood up with us at the ceremony. And she got up at the reception, and she was talking, and she said, I've loved her as far back as I can remember, and now I get to call her mom.
Yeah.
And for me, never having had children and having wanted them and having been single for 29 years, and then, this man that I'd known all my life and admired, and all of a sudden, God,
Yeah.
flipped a switch, and here we were married, and he had these two wonderful children that I already loved, and now we have two little grandboys that are just, the love of my life.
Yeah.
And so, as I was saying to Jim this morning, in retrospect, with perspective that you have as an older person, you can look back on all of these things that went on in your life, and it's like this puzzle with all of these miscellaneous pieces that at the end you see how God wove them all together and had this in mind all along. I mean, if we hadn't worked together 50 years ago, if he hadn't been born in Hanford, all of these different things that happened, none of this would have happened.
Yeah.
And so I just look at this as an incredible blessing for this part of our lives.
Yeah.
We have each other, we have the Lord in our lives, we have children and people, other relatives that we care about, and it just doesn't get any better than that.
That's right, yeah. Well, what's so cool is that, we have two individuals, and within your guys' story, we see multiple divorce.
Right.
We see years of skepticism, seeking out. Who is this guy? What is it about, right?
Right.
You mentioned going to the dark side for a few years, right?
Yeah.
So these things that we strive and we chase after that really only lead to destruction.
Right.
And then realizing, what it comes down to, starting just a personal relationship with God. And hey, do I have all the answers? No, but I'm going to get into God's word. I'm going to start trying to figure this thing out. And when God needs to correct me, he'll correct me, right? And also put the right people in your life, over the years. And I often, think about, we tend to live in a mindset of everything happens in the moment. Everything happens now. And if it doesn't happen now, then it's the end of the world. But we serve a God that works in the light of eternity.
Right.
So 12 years to God is nothing, right? Like you said, 50 years from when you got to say, to God, that's just, it's all part of the plan, And so, but what a great story. And I wish we had more time because I feel like there's a lot more. And so, but just what a way of encouraging you that are watching this. Maybe you're going through divorce. Maybe you're a single parent. Maybe you've got questions. Maybe you find yourself in a relationship that you're like, this isn't the right relationship I need to be in. Or maybe you're just in some dark places and you need to come out. And God is faithful and God is calling you. And he is saying, I am here. And so, man, what an encouraging story. You guys are just a huge blessing. I hear about you often. I've spent a few cool times with the grandkids, so I know what a blessing they are. And so, so we just appreciate you guys and just what you mean to this church and this community, and a lot of history. And who would have thought, all because of Sears. This whole thing happened.
Well, and if there's anything that we can do to help anybody else that's going through any of those things, we'd love to be able to do that.
Yeah, awesome.
That's the other part of being older, is that you do want to give back and you want to help people that are going through some of the same things that you did. And maybe you can help make it a little bit easier and also maybe guide them so that they don't go to the dark side for as long or have some of those rough bumps.
Yeah. So let us know. If you're hearing these stories and something is resonating with you, let us know and we can get you in contact with Jim and Pat, and would love to do that. And so, hey, thank you guys for your time.
It's our honor.
Thank you for your story and your ministry. And we just look forward to just hearing more about what God is doing in your lives. And stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And,
Jason.
thank you. And hey, thanks for joining us tonight on Gateway Midweek. Have a blessed week. We miss you guys. We love you. And we'll just keep connecting with you because that is what we do. God bless.